Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alyson Grange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Safe haven gold surpasses the key $3,200 mark for the first time as economic concerns grow over an intensifying trade war. This as global stocks fall and the dollar index sinks to a decade low amid China's retaliation against President Trump's latest tariff blitz. Taiwan charges a Chinese ship captain for the first time for allegedly serving under an undersea telecom cable, and this as the captain and his Togolese registered ship remain detained after a February incident in the sensitive waterway between China and Taiwan. Taliban publicly executes 4 people, the highest number of executions to be carried out in a single day since its return to power in Afghanistan in 2021. Tanzania charges its main opposition leader with treason a day after detaining him following a rally in the country's south. This comes as the East African nation intensifies its crackdown on opposition figures. And a tourist helicopter crash in New York's Hudson River, killing all 6 people on board, including a senior Siemens executive and his family. Authorities say an investigation is underway to determine the cause of the crash. Hello and welcome. We begin with the latest developments from the East African country of Kenya. A national high school drama competition in the country has been overshadowed by drama of its own after police fired tear gas to disperse a crowd that had gathered to watch a controversial play, Echoes of War, which draws parallels to protests against Kenyan President William Ruto's policies. Tensions flared in the western town of Nakuru when students from Butere Girls High School stormed out of the competition venue, demanding the release of the play's author, Cleophas Malala, who had been detained by police on Wednesday night. Malala, a former senator and playwright, was blocked from meeting the students for final rehearsals, despite holding a court order dated the 3rd of April that permitted the staging of the play. He was later detained without being formally charged.
I asked where the charge sheet or the summons were, and they had none. Yet, I have a court order that grants me permission to stage the play. So, why will they arrest me on the middle of the road, at night, and they are not telling me where they are taking me?
While Malala was later released without charges, the students boycotted the performance of their play and chanted outside their school buses as well and sang the national anthem as police officers who had sealed off the venue stood and watched. Camera crews filmed the standoff between security forces and students. Now, Echoes of War is set in a fictional kingdom ruled by a tyrannical sultan and features youth rising against oppressive leadership and facing off with police, drawing comparisons to real-world events in Kenya, especially last year's protest by young people against the tax rises. But the play has drawn the ire of the government, which questioned Malala's role in the competition and said that politicians should not use students to advance their political agendas. The row has sparked a public uproar in Kenya, with rights group Amnesty International saying it was pointing to a worrying pattern of state-sponsored repression of free expression and press freedom. Now, the Chief Justice and the President of Kenya's Supreme Court, Malala's detention contravened that court order, saying that the play and its author be allowed to take part in the competition. She further noted that defiance of court orders undermined the authority of the courts and posed a serious threat to the rule of law. On social media, users slammed the police response, calling it an attack on artistic freedom and youth expression, with many users noting that the themes in the play reflected the students' experiences during the festival. Now, some users even shared posters criticizing the Ruto government. In recent months, President Ruto has faced growing public criticism, along with reports of a crackdown on dissent, including allegations of forced disappearances and abductions. Now, the National Drama Festival finals are scheduled to take place at the State House, with selected student plays performed in the presence of the President. As of now, it remains unconfirmed whether Echoes of War will be included in the final lineup. To discuss more on this, we are being joined by Sophia Rajab, a human rights lawyer, live from Kilifi County in Kenya. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Alyson.
How does the police response to the Butere Girls High School play reflect the current state of freedom of expression and artistic freedoms in Kenya, especially among the youth?
It is very clear from the response of the police and other actors within the government, from the Ministry of Health, sentiments from the permanent secretaries of the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Interior, that artistic freedom is under attack. And this has been a systemic issue that we have noticed and that has escalated, as you said, from last year's protests against the government and the tax hikes at the time. We have seen increasingly the police being used to target political dissidents. We have seen the police being used to target criticizers of the government. And this has been a trend that we've observed, especially within the last year. So from abductions to people being brought to court essentially for allegedly contravening criminal statutes. We've seen a systemic crackdown on the freedom of expression from this government.
Right. Sophia, this play, Echoes of War, explores youth disillusionment with leadership in a fictional kingdom, a theme that appears to have struck a nerve. Why do you think authorities reacted so strongly to the student production? And what does it reveal about the relationship between politics and the education system?
I believe that the authorities reacted so strongly because it really did hit a nerve. I mean, they say that art is a mirror reflection of society. And as much as this plays hyperbole, and I mean, it's very explicitly indicated in the script that it is hyperbole, it is a reflection of what is happening in society. Art has always played a very pivotal role in discussing societal issues, in discussing societal problems, in discussing issues of corruption, issues of holding governments accountable, and really discussing issues that affect us on a day-to-day. So I think having the mirror reflected upon them is what they were quite uncomfortable with. And hence we see all these measures to try and stop the play from being played, and essentially using all means necessary to ensure that those girls do not actually tell us the story of the Echoes of War.
And given the students' bold protest, and, of course, the court's intervention to allow the play. Do you see this moment as a turning point in how young people in Kenya engage with politics and challenge the status quo through the arts?
I think this is going to renew the sense of camaraderie between different generations in holding this government accountable. I mean, the more the government tries to infringe on human rights, to infringe on the freedom of expression, yes, the more anger that you see in society and the more resentment that you see towards this government. This has nothing to do with, bringing the voices of the youth up. They actually want to suppress the voices of the youth and young people. And I think we will have the opposite effect and actually galvanize this young demographic of people, these young adults, the young children, to actually come together and actually boost the revolution. I think the government is making a huge mistake, a very big mistake in trying to curtail these voices. And the more they try and curtail these voices, the more resentment towards this government is going to be. And I honestly believe that this is a push for the revolution and will actually boost the morale among comrades around the country to continue to hold this government accountable. They have targeted journalists, they have targeted children, and that has not sat well with parents, that has not sat well with teachers, that has not sat well with the rest of the society. They tear gassed the school, children inside the bus, and that is not sitting well among us. They launched tear gas to journalists. They launched live bullets to journalists, and this is not going well, and it's not going down in the manner in which the government thought that it would.
Yeah. Sophia, thank you very much for being with us on First Post Africa and your valued insights there.
Thank you so much for having me, Alyson. Happy to be here again.
Shifting focus to Zimbabwe, the country is paying millions in compensation to white farmers whose land was forcibly seized 2 decades ago. Zimbabwe's government has announced an initial payout of $3 million to local white farmers who lost their land in the early 2000s. The farms were seized during a controversial land reform program between 2000 and 2001. Now, this is the first payment under a 2020 compensation deal between the state and the farmers. Under that agreement, Zimbabwe promised to pay $3.5 billion in total. The current payout covers 378 farms out of the 740 approved for compensation. Now, it accounts for just 1% of the $311 million allocated for the first phase. The government says that this marks a step toward honoring its obligations to compensate farmers affected by land seizures. In 2000, then President Robert Mugabe launched a radical land reform. Thousands of white farmers lost their land, which was redistributed to black Zimbabweans. The move was meant to correct historic injustices. As at independence in 1980, most fertile land was owned by just 4,000 black farmers. But the land reforms were often violent and aggressive. Critics say that many farms went to Mugabe's political allies, while new landholders lacked the tools and training to farm effectively. In the aftermath, agricultural production collapsed and the economy crashed. Now, Zimbabwe's relations with the West also fell apart. President Emmerson Mnangagwa, who came to power after the 2017 coup, has been trying to repair ties with the West. Zimbabwe has been isolated from the global financial system for over 2 decades. Its economy is still burdened with massive foreign debt. Earlier this year, the government also began compensating foreign investors whose land was protected under bilateral treaties. The latest compensation move also comes as neighboring South Africa faces tensions with the U.S. President Donald Trump accuses South Africa of seizing white-owned farms and has used it to justify cutting aid and expelling diplomats. Analysts say that Zimbabwe's payouts could help to repair Western relations and avoid international scrutiny. And Shifting focus to Gabon in West Africa, an oil-rich nation, which is set to vote tomorrow in a monumental presidential election. Gabon is holding its first election since the 2023 military coup. Now, the coup ended the Bongo family's 56-year rule. The family governed from 1967 to 2023, one of Africa's longest dynastic rules. Now, 8 candidates are competing for the presidency. Now, first is Brice Oligui Nguema, the transitional president and coup leader who ousted the former president Ali Bongo. He is running as an independent candidate. Second is Alain Claude Billy-Vainze, a former prime minister under the ousted president Ali Bongo. Then there is Stéphane Germain Iloko from the Large Rassemblement Ancien Party, and Hélène Simplice Bourgeois from Gabonese Patriotic Party. And 4 others are running as independent candidates. However, the absolute favorite in the race is Brice Oligui Nguema, the coup leader who now dominates Gabon's politics. Now, his popularity comes with some context. The 2023 Gabon coup was unusual. Nguema was a cousin of the ousted president Ali Bongo. The military intervened hours after the disputed election. There was no bloodshed. Citizens celebrated the fall of the dynasty. The political detainees were released, but Bongo's wife and son remain in custody on corruption charges. Unlike other West African junta leaders, Nguema maintains close ties with France. He has swapped his military uniform for a suit. He now speaks of a new Gabon rising from the ashes and promises to build the nation.
Democracy will no longer be a distant promise, but a living reality. In the Fifth Republic, decentralization and the free administration of local authorities will be a reality. In the Fifth Republic, governance will be efficient and corruption will have no place.
If Nguema wins, which reports suggest is highly likely, he gets a 7-year term and control of vast resources, enough to push through reforms that most African leaders can only dream of. Now, Gabon has a population of 2.4 million and has vast resources. It's an oil producer and the world's second largest manganese exporter. Its tropical rainforests are part of the Congo Basin. It's among Africa's richest countries and also the most stable, with no civil wars and few conflicts. But challenges remain. Gabon relies too heavily on oil and output is falling, so an economic diversification is needed. Debt is rising too. It's set to hit 80% of GDP this year. Now, voters want more job creation, and above all, they want proof that this is a real transition and that the country will not plunge into authoritarianism.
It's important because I am a citizen and then to be able to choose the right person for the proper functioning of our country. What we see today, there is a lot of unemployment, and we hope that with the choice we make, we can have more opportunities in various fields, whether it's health, education, etc.
Now that we're going to have a new regime, we're waiting for the new president. He has to keep all of his promises. Because it's good to make promises, but he has to keep them. He knows that the Gabonese people need roads and health care.
Gabon has the wealth, the stability, and a rare opportunity. Will the coup leader turn statesman? Will a new era rise from the shadows of dynastic rule? We will bring you the updates as the results come in. And finally, to our special segment, Resurgent Africa. Amid the coups and the crises, there are many positive stories from Africa that often get overlooked, but not on this show. Our next story is from Sierra Leone, where an engineering student is hoping to clean up the country's polluting public transport system. He aims to manufacture a fleet of solar-powered vehicles and disability-friendly EVs that would not just help people in his country breathe cleaner air, but also contribute to the fight against climate change. Our next story tells you more about this 23-year-old engineer and his climate campaign.
In Sierra Leone's capital city of Freetown, rush hours are just like any other major city across the world. Lengthy traffic jams see a long line of minibuses, mopeds, shared taxis and three-wheeled vehicles known as KKs, each spluttering toxic emissions into the air. Many of the vehicles stuck in these traffic jams are poorly maintained and have inefficient exhausts, exacerbating air pollution, which is a leading contributor to climate change. Each year, about 4.2 million people die prematurely due to outdoor air pollution, with low and middle-income countries overwhelmingly facing the impact. The United Nations Environment Programme says that in 2021, fine particle air pollution killed 1,200 people in Sierra Leone, a country of 8.5 million people. One such person was James Samba's uncle. He died from a respiratory illness after years of inhaling roadside exhaust fumes. His death spurred the 23-year-old Samba to develop his own model of an electric KK that could help clean up Sierra Leone's pollution. Assembled from recycled scrap metal and powered by batteries, the pink four-wheeled vehicle now roams the streets of the capital. Although the project is still at its nascent stage, Samba aims to offer an eco-friendly alternative to traditional fuel-run KKs.
And most of the fossil fuel emissions do come from vehicles like the bike, which my uncle used to hang on. So that actually birthed the entire idea of electric vehicles, of which I started by creating the electric wheelchair, which my uncle, of course, began using until he later passed on. But it's also something that we did have to rethink of as a team from Sierra Electric, to actually put that in the mass transportation, which is like the keke or public transportation means that we are using.
Samba has set up his own company called Sierra Electric, which manufactures solar-powered KKs and disability-friendly electric vehicles. However, a lack of funds made him partner with a startup, Neve Salon, to develop a KK powered by rooftop solar panels. Since its partnership, Neve Salon has a fleet of more than 100 solar tricycles, 3 charging stations and battery swapping cabinets for customers.
Part of what we want to do is to run a public transport at affordable price. As I said earlier, there is a challenge of transportation in the country. A lot of people, they queue, long lines, and a lot of areas, they are really going through a lot of constraints. So we want to see how we could chip in that area.
James Samba believes that solar KKs are cheaper to run as the drivers face lower maintenance costs. But the smallest of Neve Salon's solar KKs sells for over $5,200, a high price for those living in one of the world's poorest countries. Yet, despite that, some drivers have already converted to eco-friendly options amid rising fuel prices.
For example, this one is not using fuel. It is electronic, it has no noise, no air pollution, and it will not affect anybody. And it is very simple to drive and comfortable for everybody.
Taking inspiration, several other drivers have also adopted eco-friendly alternatives, while also calling women to embrace the opportunity and drive EKKs, a baby step towards tackling the air pollution crisis in the country.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again at the same time on Monday. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend and goodbye.